Right everyone, it is Finn here and welcome back to a brand new video where today we've got something quite interesting lined up because we're going to be going over my 23-man squad for England Euro 2024. Now I know quite a few people have made this video at this point, but I thought as someone who's not even from England or from the continent itself, it would be quite interesting to give my opinion on who Gareth Southgate should be taking to Germany in 2024. Now as you guys can see, I've got a tier list set up and I've got all of the players that I think are kind of in and around that England conversation, and we're going to be ranking them. We're going to be saying whether they will be in that 23-man squad. It used to be 26, but since has been reduced, whether they'll be on the waiting list. That's kind of for the players that if there is an injury or any slight changes are made, they probably could get called up. Under that, we've got unlikely, which I think is pretty self-explanatory. And finally, we've got he is staying home. Now, I do want you guys to remember that this isn't a prediction on who Southgate will be taking, but rather my squad if I was in charge of England and had to pick a team. Of course, this is quite an opinion-splitting kind of video, so if you guys have any disagreements with me, which I'm sure many people will, let me know in the comment section down below. Let's go! But jumping into this team, it's only right that we start off with the goalkeepers, and let's get the obvious one out of the way. It is Jordan Pickford, who will not just be in that 23-man squad, but he will be England's main goalkeeper, and rightfully so. 60 caps for the three lions, he's gotten 28 clean sheets in those 60 games, and in the Premier League this season to have the second most clean sheets with 10 for this Everton team is insanely impressive. Once again, it's no surprise the conversation about Pickford not really putting a foot or a glove wrong for this national team, and once again it's no surprise that I will be putting him as my main goalkeeper. I don't think it's a very uncommon opinion to have. Once again, Pickford has never really done England wrong, and he does deserve that number 1 jersey. In terms of the other goalkeepers, now I am going to get these two out of the way, and I know it is going to start quite an argument in the comment section probably, but I'm going to put Pope and Johnston in the he's staying home. Now don't get me wrong, two brilliant goalkeepers, but they have been injured. Johnston is only set to return to football in July after the tournament, where Pope once again is also injured and might only return at the end of the season at this point. Once again, if they're injured, you can't call them to the national team. I do think both are brilliant, and to be honest, if both were fully fit, both of them would be going in my opinion. But due to injuries, I just don't see it happening, and I wouldn't call upon them. Especially with the likes of other goalkeepers. Now I'm just going to put them here for now. With the likes of Jack Butland, we've got Trafford, we've got Ramsdale, and finally we've got Henderson. Once again, 4 very decent goalkeepers. Not quite to the level of Pope or Johnston in my opinion, but I do think that the likes of, now once again, this is going to surprise quite a lot of people, I would put Jack Butland there as my probably 3rd choice goalkeeper. Now I know lots of people haven't quite watched him over the last year or two, but for Rangers this season he's been phenomenal. 25 clean sheets in 52 games is absolutely outstanding. Now yes, I know a lot of people are going to say that it is the Scottish League, but at the end of the day, to have a goalkeeper who is in good form, who is match fit, and let's be honest, as a 3rd choice goalkeeper, he's not going to get any minutes most likely. Once again, to have him on the bench is not a bad option. In terms of the other goalkeeper I will be taking, who probably will be the 2nd choice, I'm going to go for Ramsdale.
It's criminal really at my age.
I just think out of the other 3 goalkeepers, between him, Henderson and Trafford, he is the best option. I think he's a fantastic goalkeeper. I know he's fallen out of favour with Arsenal this season, but at the end of the day, he puts on the crucial saves. I think he's a very charismatic character who does lift the dressing room, and I do think he is fantastic all around, and I would definitely select him. In terms of where the other keepers go, once again, Henderson, I would like to see more from him. He hasn't been awful for Crystal Palace, but once again, there are better options, and I do think it is unlikely that he will be going. I don't think Trafford is likely at all either. I know there was a lot of expectation around him after that Under-21 World Cup, but he hasn't been brilliant for Burnley, and I don't even know if he's been Burnley's best goalkeeper this season. I would like to move the likes of Nick Pope, though, to the waiting list, because I do think if there is an injury, or if he is back at that stage, that he could be on the waiting list if he's back by the end of the season. But jumping into the defenders now, let's kind of start off with the fullbacks and work our way to the centre-backs. We start off with Kyle Walker, which once again, immediately into my 23-man squad. I'm not leaving! Lots of people have spoken about the fact that maybe he's fallen off a bit this season, but number-wise, he is still brilliant. I mean, 80 passes per 90 minutes puts him in the top 96 percentile of fullbacks around the world, in the top 88%, or he gets 88% passing accuracy per 90 minutes, puts him in the top 98 percentile. In terms of progressive play, he is phenomenal. And once again, he's got this presence when he's on the field. Obviously, he's got the pace, but he's got that physical aspect as well. Once again, Kyle Walker to me is a guaranteed player in this team. Can play as a centre-back in a back three, can play as a right-back. Once again, no argument in my opinion. Now, Ben White is a bit of an interesting one because I do think it is unlikely. We know he doesn't have a great relationship with England at the moment. He's come home from multiple international breaks. Once again, great player. I just don't see it happening though. We've got the likes of Wan-Bissaka as well, which once again, probably unlikely. And I actually think Wan-Bissaka's been really good this season. I think he's been one of the star players for Man United, especially with the likes of Luke Shaw being injured and either him or Dallo having to play on that side. Yes, I know he didn't look fantastic versus Coventry in the FA Cup semi-final, giving away a penalty and that deflected goal. But other than that, he has been brilliant, but England just do have better options. Looking at the likes of someone like Kieran Trippier though, he might be going to Germany in my opinion. I know, yes, he's obviously the top assist maker, one of the top assist makers in the Prem this season with 10 assists, but he's had a massive fall off in the second half of the season in my opinion. But once again, if you look at a player with experience for this England international team, ultimately, yes, he's had bad performances this season, but I would still put him in this team. He can play on the left, he can play on the right, and I do think with the kind of injury-prone players in this England team, you need someone with this versatility. In terms of other options, once again, Rico Lewis might move players around later on, but I would at least put him in the waiting list. Yes, he hasn't gotten a lot of game time this Premier League season. It is a very competitive team, but still enough to kind of prove to me that he could play for this England national team on a kind of tournament-based level. Once again, at least on the waiting list. Now, once again, a very interesting player. I'm going to put Joe Gomez in my England team here. He's absolutely resurrected his career at Liverpool this season, really proving that maybe even if he can't play as a centre-back from time to time, that he really can fill into other positions. I mean, he can play as a left, a right, or a centre-back. I think he's been absolutely brilliant. Obviously, famously, the only player not to score under Jurgen Klopp.
What did she say?
But at the end of the day, in terms of a player who will physically bully you, I do think he does deserve a spot on this team. I guess we'll just have to see whether he physically bullies someone like Raheem Sterling if I end up picking him. But at the end of the day, I do think Joe Gomez has redeemed himself here, which would sound mental if you told someone 2 years ago that you would put him in the squad over someone like Aaron Wan-Bissaka as a right back. Absolutely mental, but it is the case. Now, in terms of someone like Konsa, once again, he's been very phenomenal this season, has gotten an England call-up, but I do think it is unlikely due to how many options there are here. In terms of someone like Livramento, once again, very similar scenario. I do think it's unlikely. Maybe I'll kind of move him to a waiting list. But once again, I do think Rico Lewis is a lot more likely than him. He's a phenomenal player. It's just such a competitive position. Now, in terms of kind of the left back and right back, or we've got one more right back here, with Reece James. Now, maybe I'm going to put him on the waiting list here. I know that sounds absurd because on his day, he might be the best right back in the world. But so many injuries, obviously undergone surgery. We don't know what his fitness state will be like come the tournament. And once again, kind of my arguments with the goalkeepers. Can you call up people who are currently injured? I really like Reece James, a proper leader from the back. A real athlete, very physical, very fast. He can get the assists. But at the end of the day, once again, I might just want someone who's just able to play football.
Ooh, you're hard, showing off.
Now, moving on to the left backs, I'm going to go for Luke Shaw, which I know might sound contradictory after what I've just said about Reece James. But once again, when Luke Shaw plays, I mean, he's really the only left back option for England, or at least the best option. He is set to return by later April, so he should at least have a month of football before the Euros roll around, which could be very crucial. And once again, we saw Luke Shaw in the previous Euros scoring in that final. He is a player that needs to be called up. In terms of someone like the other left back, I mean, I'm looking at Ben Chilwell here. Now, I have heard quite a few people say that they wouldn't call up two kind of injury-prone players in the same position here. But ultimately, I mean, looking at Ben Chilwell, looking in that FA Cup semi-final versus Man City, his running ability, his ability to win fouls, his passing, he is a phenomenal player. And once again, I do think it's a risk you're willing to take. But once again, I would understand if someone took either Chilwell or Shaw out and they put Rico Lewis in there. I really would understand. Now, jumping kind of more into the centre-back kind of roles, once again, I think you guys will see a lot of names here at the bottom of the screen who aren't really around the England setup. I kind of took this tier list from someone else and added in some of my own players. So a lot of these players, once again, I'm not even going to really give a shout. Someone like Tyrone Mings, for example, I mean, I'm not even going to put him on the board. He's not in this England conversation.
Fair enough.
Which is mental to think about 2-3 years ago, how prominent he was for this team. But looking at our next player, we've got Guy. Now, I will be honest, maybe he does go on my waiting list. I think he's a phenomenal player. I think him personally, he's been very solid for Crystal Palace. And I do think he is one of those centre-backs who on his day could move to a top 6 Premier League team. I think in terms of his passing, once again, he is a leadership kind of player. He's a very strong presence. But once again, it's just too competitive. Now moving on, John Stones, once again, no surprise, will be going to Germany in this England squad for me. I do think he is outright England's best centre-back and maybe most talented defender. I mean, we've really seen him under Pep Guardiola play in numerous positions, whether it be a defensive midfielder, a fullback. I think he's only played as a centre-back or started as a centre-back in 6 games for City this season.
We cannot replace him.
But for this England national team, once again, he is without a doubt going. No argument about it. And I do think that goes for the likes of Harry Maguire. I know he's had his difficult times in the past, but once again, like many other players I might mention in this video, for England, he is almost never disappointed. He is the top goal-scoring defender in England history, and he's also just scored versus Coventry, showing that he does still have it. But once again, jokes aside, I do think Harry Maguire on his day has been solid for England, and once again, until he kind of lets the national team down, I'm not going to think otherwise. In terms of other centre-backs, once again, Lewis Dunk, I really do like. I would put him on my waiting list, to be honest with you. Once again, like so many players, has brilliant leadership. I think his many seasons at Brighton has gone unnoticed, but I would at least put him in the conversation, to be honest. But it does seem unlikely. In terms of other centre-backs, I've got the likes of Colwell here. I would definitely take him. I think in terms of a really good passing, distributing centre-back, I think he's absolutely phenomenal. And I do think in terms of playing kind of a progressive style of football, I would have someone like Colwell there. He's made a real name for himself. In terms of, I think I've got 2 more centre-backs here with the likes of, let's put Tomori and Branthwaite here. In terms of one of them, if one of them had to go to the Euros, who am I choosing here? I do like Branthwaite. I think he's had a really good season with Everton. But once again, kind of due to experience, I'm going to have to put Tomori in this team. We've seen him over the years for AC Milan at this point. He has been brilliant. I'm still shocked by how little game time he has gotten for the England international team. But at the end of the day, I do think he has to go. He's a brilliant player. I think he's gotten he's in the top 87 percentile of centre-backs worldwide in terms of his passing range, showing that once again, very progressive style of football, especially with the wide kind of fast wingers I'm going to be mentioning a tiny bit later. I do think he does fit the system a bit more appropriately. Now, kind of moving into the midfielders, once again, we've got some very interesting names here, but let's get some obvious ones. Declan Rice, the £100 million man for Arsenal, could be the difference maker in terms of them winning the season. I mean, lots of people kind of knew his quality before he left West Ham, but I do think this season he's kind of proven that he can do it for a big team on the big stage. He's been absolutely brilliant, and once again, probably worth every single penny, and he will end up starting for this England team. In terms of Calvin Phillips, I mean, yeah, Southgate might put him in the conversation, but I just don't think that's an appropriate thing. He needs to stay home, in my opinion. He's barely started. I think he's played 2 games for City since he moved there like 2-3 years ago. He's been awful for West Ham United this season. There's just no way, in my opinion, that I would put him in this England team. And kind of same goes to Mason Mount. I mean, he's not really played for Man United this season. I mean, yes, he scored a goal versus Brentford that immediately got equalised.
He's the best football player in the world.
But once again, Mason Mount's just nowhere where he used to be. He's not even on the waiting list. To me, it is very unlikely that he will be going. Now, next up, once again, whether you want to call him a midfielder or a defender, let's be honest, Trent has to go to this competition, which, once again, he has played 5 of his 23 games for England as a midfielder, as a central midfielder, which it's weird to think, a quarter of his national games as a midfielder. And they have won 4 of those 5 games and drawn 1. Once again, you need his creativity in the midfield, especially with so many defensive options. And it does allow for the ability that if something does happen to someone like a Trippier, for example, or whoever else they end up playing at right back, that he can still slot into that position. Once again, you kind of need his creativity and his passing ability to kind of progress the attack moving forward. And yeah, once again, I don't feel like he's a player many people question being in the squad. We've also got the likes of James Ward-Prowse, which I will admit, very unlikely in my opinion. I personally really like him. I think his set pieces are so important. But in terms of the style of play that England are trying to play at the moment, I just don't see him being the player who could win it for England. I don't see him being the major difference maker, which might be harsh, but hey, it's the reality. In terms of the other midfielders, I'm going to go for the likes of James Maddison next. And this might be difficult, but I'm putting him in the waiting list.
What? What is this? For what? Why?
I know that is going to piss a lot of people off, but you can only take 23 players here, and I do think there isn't another attacking midfielder that will keep him off, and that is Cole Palmer. I think Cole Palmer, this part of the season, 20 goals in the Prem, the same amount as Erling Haaland. I do think that is the reason why James Maddison might not even end up going. I mean, especially if you've got him in the midfield with someone like Trent Alexander-Arnold, you don't really need another player who's a brilliant passer off the ball or a great creative player. You've already kind of got that. And you could even play someone like, let's say, Phil Foden in that position. Ultimately, I think Palmer is the reason that James Maddison might not end up going. Obviously, Maddison picked up an injury at a point in the season and hasn't quite been the same since. Don't get me wrong. I personally, now before everyone gets pissed off at me, I would gladly put Maddison in this team. It's just a matter of I don't know who I'd take out for him. In terms of the other midfielders, once again, Loftus-Cheek, he's been decent this season, but let's be honest, he's just not going. Curtis Jones, I would say the same. Great players, but just not in the conversation. Ramsey, once again, a player I really do like, but once again, I just don't see that happening. Now, once again, very much like Phillips, Henderson. Now, this is an interesting one. He's been part of the system for so long. He keeps on getting called up, but I think it's finally time for Gareth Southgate to cut the rope a bit.
It's been 84 years.
I just don't think Jordan Henderson has a place in this team anymore. I mean, he was brought to Ajax from the Saudi League for his leadership, kind of to bring them up from the relegation zone, which they have done that, but once again, not even really in the top 4 for the Eredivisie at the moment. It's been a very weird season, and once again, I just think there are far better players in this England team in that position at the moment. Now, in terms of, let's put the likes of Conor Gallagher in there. I think Conor Gallagher needs to be in this team, to be honest with you. Look at him. He's really the only out-and-out box-to-box midfielder in this team. He's kind of one of the only midfielders here who could do both attacking and defensive duties. He has had a really, really good season for Chelsea. Really, really solid. And once again, a player with a lot of leadership that I do think Gareth Southgate will value. Sorry for the quick interruption. I saw while making this tier list, whoever created this tier list for some reason didn't include the likes of Kobe Mainoo, but they did include the likes of Longstaff in this team, which is quite bizarre. But yes, looking at Kobe Mainoo, he is definitely one of those players I was referring to in terms of there being better players than Henderson. Once again, I think he's really made a name for himself. He could definitely even start for this England national team, especially when there's kind of a defensive setup. Once again, Kobe Mainoo has proven that he can be a game winner, even winning a man of the match for England in this recent international break. Kobe Mainoo, in my opinion, without a doubt, needs to go to Germany in Euro 2024. Now, next midfielder, Morgan Gibbs-White, I think is a phenomenal player, but I don't think will end up going. I do think even if he was in that conversation, he would be overshadowed by the likes of someone like James Maddison. But I do think he could be a very similar caliber of player if he moves to another team. Now, Jude Bellingham, 100%. I mean, once again, I'm surprised I didn't put him there earlier. Another £100 million midfielder from England for Real Madrid this season. Absolutely phenomenal. He's just scored another winner versus Barcelona in El Clasico. 17 goals in 25 games in La Liga this season. I mean, you could even play him as a centre forward or a second striker at this rate. Jude Bellingham has been brilliant this season, and I probably don't need to talk about it that much. In terms of Harvey Elliott, once again a player I really like, but I do think it is highly unlikely. I would personally definitely have him in this team over many players who are currently in this team. I think he's a great creative player. He can win fouls. I've heard many people say that it's criminal to have Kobe Mainoo in this team but not Harvey Elliott, which makes no sense in my opinion, as they are two totally different players who play totally different positions. It's just not something you can really compare.
You idiot. You're honestly an idiot. I don't know what's wrong with you.
And finally, jumping into the attack, let's start off with the wingers, and this might upset a lot of people, but I'm not going to put Jack Grealish in my 23-man squad.
Like Steph Curry, you get me?
Don't get me wrong, I think he is a brilliant player and heavily misunderstood as a player. His role has never been for the City team to score goals or to get assists. He wins fouls in crucial moments. We saw that in the first leg versus Real Madrid, him winning that foul. For that, I think it was that Bernardo Silva goal. But at the end of the day, looking at Jack Grealish, I just don't think for this England national team, he is what they need in their setup. I do think they do need a player whose role is to score goals. And for this England team, maybe he hasn't been that at club level this season, I would put Marcus Rashford over him.
Do not even.
Which I do understand would upset a lot of people. But when it comes to this England international team, Rashford is more clinical when it comes to scoring goals, and I do think that is what England needs. Although I'm sure many people will have their opinion about that down below. Now, in terms of other winger options, Anthony Gordon, once again, I just don't see it happening. Could he be on the waiting list? I definitely do think so. I think he's a phenomenal player. I think he's been brilliant for Newcastle United. But once again, it is just a highly competitive position in this team. In the likes of Madueke, once again, it's very unlikely. In fact, I would just say that he's staying home. I do think he has a potential place in this team eventually, whether that's taking the penalty spot away from Cole Palmer. We'll have to wait and see. But at the end of the day, once again, too competitive, and I don't see him touching the squad. Now, next up, a player that I will be putting into my 23-man squad, it is Jared Bowen. Been phenomenal. 15 goals and 5 assists for West Ham United this season. What will it take for people to finally give this man the recognition he deserves? He is absolutely brilliant. Obviously, he scored the winning goal to win West Ham United a European trophy. That should say it all, and I would definitely put him in this team because they do need right-wing options, because at the moment, it really is just him and, well, Bukayo Saka, which I hope that's not a surprise. He definitely should be going the star boy and the best player in that position for England at the moment. But once again, I do think with these two on the right wings, England should be sorted. Now, next up, Phil Foden once again should start as a left wing in my opinion. I would put him down as the player of the season for the Premier League so far. He has been absolutely phenomenal in terms of goals and assists for both Champions League and Premier League. He could be the reason why Man City end up winning the Premier League this season. I do think it does go down to a player like him in terms of his quality, and I could definitely see him scoring in the final of the FA Cup as well. Phil Foden, once again, technically a very good player, and I think people still forget how young he is and the things he's achieved at his age. He genuinely could go on to win a Ballon d'Or.
Why would you say something so controversial yet so brave?
In terms of other wingers, once again, we've got the likes of Raheem Sterling, which you'll try and avoid Joe Gomez over here. But ultimately, I just think it's very unlikely. Yes, for many years, he was the man for England. And I mean, there have been tournaments where he's been better for England than Harry Kane. And to be honest, I could put him in the same kind of argument as Rashford in terms of a player who does well for England. I just think he's been out of it for so long, I don't see it happening. And once again, kind of same goes to Jadon Sancho. Yes, he's in the Champions League semi-final, but he's just not the player he used to be, and until he gets his personal numbers up, he's not being included. Now, next up, also Harvey Barnes. Once again, let's be honest, in terms of all the players I've mentioned in this team, he's not getting above many of them, although I do really think he's talented. Now, jumping into the strikers, it's so unfortunate about Tammy Abraham. He was so good a year or two ago for Roma, but once again, in terms of the competition at the moment, highly unlikely. In terms of someone like Solanke, I think he's been phenomenal this season. I think he's like the 3rd or 4th top goal scorer in the Prem. Absolutely phenomenal, but once again, I might put him in my waiting list, yeah. I do think there are some really good options, but I would at least put him in my waiting list because the season he's had with Bournemouth, he should at least be in the conversation. Next up, we've got the likes of Wilson a year or two ago, like many others in this team. I would have given a shout, but I just don't see him getting over many other names here, and I think it's highly unlikely. Now, we do have 3 more strikers, and am I going to put them all in? I'm not going to put them all in, but gasp! But I obviously am going to put Harry Kane here. Once again, England's top goal scorer of all time, 40 goals in 41 games this season. We don't have to talk about him. He is the obvious one here. But Ollie Watkins and Ivan Toney, the last two players I'm going to be talking about in this video, and I'm only going to take one of them. Now, I know many people would say that on his day, Ivan Toney is a better striker, which maybe I would agree to some extent, but you cannot leave Ollie Watkins out of this team. The second top goal scorer in the Premier League this season. He is the top assist maker. Overall, he is my Premier League player of the season over someone even like Phil Foden. He has been nothing but exceptional for this team. And once again, I think it would be such a disservice to his ability to leave him out of this England squad. He can play a very similar role to Harry Kane, which I know lots of people have a problem with. But to be honest, I think the synergy and the connection between these two, you could play them as a front two together. But saying that, I also think Ollie Watkins could play as a wing. We've seen him out in that left wing position before. But ultimately, Ollie Watkins needs to go. And I know Ivan Toney recently scored his first goal for England. But once again, in terms of game time, he hasn't played enough this season. And I do think the likes of both Watkins and Kane do need to go. Worst case scenario, the likes of Bowen can play as a striker as well. Rashford can play as a striker as well. And also the likes of Jude Bellingham could play as a false nine. I do just think there are other options. But that, ladies and gentlemen, is it for my 23-man squad for England Euro 2024. It was not an easy list to make, and I do understand that a lot of people will have different opinions. So do let me know down below. Don't forget to like, don't forget to subscribe, and if you have any other teams you want me to kind of do this video with, let me know down below. But Gareth Southgate, you've definitely got your work cut out for you. I definitely do think that you are probably going to make some different calls and changes here, but I guess we'll have to wait and see. Guys, this has been Finn. Like, subscribe. I'll see you all very, very soon. Cheers. Bye.